Hello again, and welcome to this week's edition of SCLC TV. I'm Maynard Eaton, and of course, our president and CEO, Dr. Charles Steele Jr. Dr. Steele, Atlanta, sometimes called the cradle of the civil rights movement, was in national news today because District Attorney Paul Howard indicted Golf Roth, ex-policeman, for felony murder and aggravated assault for the killing of Rashad Brooks. Your reaction, sir?
Well, I think it was the right thing to do. And as you know, District Attorney Paul Howard had said earlier that he was going to expeditiously get involved with this particular case and bring about a decision in terms of indictment. It's a thing that you call prima facie. When you have the evidence, you move forward. You don't wait for a grand jury. You don't wait for anyone else. You do your job by your oath in a public official like a district attorney, and you do what is necessary, and it's called doing the right thing. And I applaud him for taking those type of initiatives and commitment on doing the right thing.
Was this a political move, you think? He's running for re-election. Was it a proper civil rights move? How do you view how he had to approach this?
Well, he came about with various charges, and it was something that expeditiously he had to go out and really get opinions, get other videos in terms of people that were there. He also had to interview people. And gentlemen, think about this, Mr. Eaton, and to our producer, Mr. Clear. The fact being is that the other officer has committed to testify against his partner, who actually fired the shot and put 2 bullets in the back of Rashad and Brooks. And that's something I was always taught and told. You never shoot a man in the back. You never jump on the back of any individual when you're in a confrontation. That is something that you don't do. This man was running away. And regardless of that, the taser gun was not a deadly force, regardless of what anyone says, because the police, law enforcement themselves use this in court all the time. And why would they use a taser gun if it was a legal weapon, if it was a deadly weapon? They use it all the time.
Sir, you are an Alabama native who lives in Atlanta now. Our headquarters is in Atlanta. Has this case cast a different light about Atlanta? It's known as a civil rights community. It's known as a black city, black Mecca. Isn't the eyes of the world on this city now in a different light, is it not?
Well, right, Mr. Eaton, you cannot separate no city, regardless of Atlanta or Birmingham, Alabama, or New York, or any other city in this country. You cannot separate Atlanta or any other city in this country and think that they're superbly bypassed when it comes to systemic racism. I don't care what black Mecca you have. Regardless, the problems are the same. And when you get to the realization of Atlanta versus the rest of the cities or metropolis within America, it's all the same. And that's just like, to me, when I was growing up in the South, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and someone say, I live in Chicago, I live in Detroit, and I came down and let y'all see my new car. I'm better than you Negroes. I'm better than black folks. Hey, you can't separate the systemic and the institutionalized of racism.
Today, in an effort to so-called reform policing in America, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina introduced a bill that would so-called suggest a banning of chokeholds and other reforms. He told the audience of press, he said, "We hear you," to the families. "We see you," to young protesters. Others have said it was the chairwoman of the Black Caucus, Congressional Black Caucus, Representative Karen Bass, says it's inadequate, it's window dressing, it's a toothless bill. What say you, Mr. President?
Well, first of all, I know Senator Tim Scott and like him as a person, individual. He's always there whenever we call him. And he's in a very influential position. But don't forget, he is contained in a system. And it's a system that's worse than any other system in regards to politics, because he's in the Republican Party. And who's going to be misled to think just because you have a good idea that it's going to get the attention of those who are very conservative and run off of being conservative and talking about we're not going to take care of the rest of America because that'll make them lazy. That's what the party said and the leadership of that party. So if you don't care about me having a job and getting a job, and if you provide money and training opportunity for those who are unemployed, that we're not going to do it, and you represent this party, it was not Senator Scott who said this, but it was one of the leading members of the Republican Party, along with the caucus within the party, saying that they're not coming up with no more money for the citizenry of those 40 million people plus who's out of work, because it'll make them lazy. So how should we turn around and believe anything that comes out of the mouths of a Republican that's talking about doing something for the betterment of poor people and black folks?
Let me ask you a kind of a personal question. I have black friends in Atlanta and across the country who happen to be Republican. Shelley Winter name come to mind, Leo Smith and others. Rick Clear does too, our producer, I'm sure. But how do you reconcile the differences we have between the Trump politics and Afro-American centric ideals? How do you deal with that, sir?
Well, first of all, Mr. Eden, you always heard me say, I'm not Republican, not Democrat. Yeah, I'm Baptist.
Right, that's true.
I say that all the time. Yes, I'm with the influence of the Democratic Party. Of course, I ran as an elected official for over 18 years. I was in the Democratic Party and was proud of it, glad to be. But it is another system, and it's the best system of politics for those who are less fortunate and been left out of the process and have not been included in terms of the development of this country ever since we were forced to come here through the immigration of slavery, transatlantic African slave trade. But my point being, no politics can free you. I don't care which party it is. The party can work with us, but we must pressure the politicians and the party. I go back to Frederick Douglass. Repetition is a mother of skill. I'm going to keep saying it. In terms of the power, power concedes to no one without a demand. So how will we expect the Republican Party, even though they have a black man who's chairing the committee, to come out with something that's going to be beneficial to those who are ex-slaves, those who can't access money per capita because of the system? The system has never done anything for us. We have to demand. And what the Democrats are doing in the Black Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus, is the right thing to do, because they're saying we're not going for that. It's toothless.
Senator Shelley Moore said today that America and politicians should be pro-civil rights and pro-police. Is that a non sequitur? Can they both go together?
It's a thing called happy medium. Everything can work out better for people. We are social animals. We have to get along with each other. You find happy mediums, and that means that you negotiate, you come to the table, but let me tell you something. You got to use your leverage. It's all about the leverage that you use. And this is a pivotal moment for African Americans and people in the civil rights movement, and particularly in the position that I'm in as president CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. We have to use this leverage as much as we can. I was impressed with a young man who's a quarterback of Atlanta Falcons. thought I would never hear it. Matt Ryan was on Sports Center yesterday. He said, I've been quiet too long. Man, I like to fell out of my seat. He said, it's not in the advantage to me, nor the people who need my support or the people I can help by standing up and speaking out, because I can have empathy and sympathy, but that's not like standing up, coming to the table and voicing my opinion. And he was saying, in other words, that now is the time for all of us to stand up and do what's right. That doesn't mean that you can't work with law enforcement. That doesn't mean that Black lives don't matter. That doesn't mean that you can't work with civil rights organizations. It does mean bringing all of the institutionalized, historically, banking institution, historically, academic institution, is historically jobs opportunities. We need to historically eradicate the racism that's keeping us from moving from the 2 or 3 yard line on the football field when everybody else is on the 10-yard line getting ready to make a touchdown.
I had an interview yesterday with a guy named Dr. Carlton Donald, who's owner of Phygenics. He's a biophysicist. He's a scientist. He's a genius. But he says for 13 years, he's tried to run a business with no investment. He says being Black doesn't get you on a fair playing field in the business world either. He says it's just as Black in the business world as it is out there protesting against police. I'm sure you've seen that too.
Well, all small businesses, regardless who they are, but just think about the Black business. All small businesses, 80% of the businesses in this country are small businesses. All small businesses, and then you separate that in being a Black business or one day from going out of business. All small businesses. So what am I saying? You have to have a support mechanism. I've been working for myself ever since I was 23 years of age. I've been working for myself. Always had a job. Always had a consulting firm. Always had the initiative to create opportunities so I can help others. And I always knew I had the courageousness that most people don't have, and that is to miss a meal. That's to sleep on the floor and to work honestly with integrity and do what you can to move up to the next level. And I thank God for that insight, and for my parents who motivated me and say, whatever you do the right thing. Make a living. I don't care if it's digging a ditch, but let it be honest. And that's how I live, and that's what I've been for 73 years of my life.
Dr. Steele, you've been a civil rights leader for all your life, most of your adult life, and now as a president of SCLC. As you look at what's transpired over the past 2 months, COVID-19 impacting Black folks most, police brutality impacting Black folks, street protests, is this the quintessential time for the civil rights movement? Is this another day, a new day?
See, what people don't realize, and if you haven't been involved, this has always been a reality within our lives. You know, I've never known it when it's been good or when it's been great for us. I used to hear my mom and dad talking about how we going to pay the note, how we going to pay the car note. We didn't have 2 cars. We had 1 car, you know. And then my mama always told us, son, we don't have nothing to eat today, but it's just our business in this house. Don't tell nobody about the fact of how we don't have no food in the icebox. But I come back home some kind of way. Daddy would go out and find a way to get some money, and I come home from school and I smell all that aroma coming out of the kitchen. Oh my Lord, we have a time eating. So what am I saying? It's always been a struggle for me. Now there's some in denial. Some folks will say, oh, you know, we were poor, but we didn't know it. I was poor, and I knew we was poor. You know, my mama used to say days are going to get better, and we want you to do better than your father and I have done. But these are the processes that you must go through. First of all, you got to be honest. You got to have integrity. You got to do a hard labor job. You can't go to the top without starting at the bottom. And I always dug ditches, worked in the steel mills in Detroit, Michigan, go back and pay my tuition for college. Always had a job. While I was in college, I would get in with the cafeteria supervisor, always cleaning up, mopping floors, always, but didn't have a room in the dormitory. So I had to build a relationship with somebody in the dormitory who had an extra bed. And when they didn't have an extra bed in the dormitory, I slept on the floor. So what am I talking about? And would allow myself to call home and say I need some money because I ran out of money. But
what do you tell these young protesters? What do you tell these young protesters in the street? Is there a better day ahead for them? What do you say to these young people out there?
It's a process. It's a process. And they doing the right thing non-violently. I oppose committedly and Christianly. I oppose any forms of violence. Like I said earlier with the 6 steps, the direct action in the 6 steps is number 5. That's where you do the leveraging. See, we got to be taught. Dr. King and others taught people about the movement. They had training before they had a march. You don't know who getting in your march. People with all the training Dr. King had, they tried and they did. They infiltrated the movement. They infiltrated it to the point he got killed. That's why he went back on to Memphis on the second trip to prove that he could lead a nonviolent march. But it was a group, a gang called the Black Invaders out of Memphis that opposed Dr. King for whatever reason. There's a lot of stories behind that. But they're the one that turned it violently. And they were staying at the motel, Dr. King. Well, people infiltrate you just to bring about a destruction of what you're trying to provide for those who are in need and the least of those who's trying to get a decent job, get decent wages, hourly wages. That's why he was there with the garbage workers. But that wasn't Dr. King march. That was the Union March. That was not Dr. King's march. He got off course because normally he was training the people and had marshals who was training.
Right. Marshals, yeah.
So the marshal job, number 1, is to make sure no one is infiltrating this march and looking out for the violent type of perspectives of people.
Is marching over the past 20 days around the world making a difference, you think?
Absolutely. A great difference. Over in Tokyo, Japan, London, England, throughout South America, all over the world, people paying attention, not just paying attention, they are marching and they are demonstrating. My only concern is what's hurting the civil rights movement is a lack of collaboration. And the enemy knows that.
Seemingly, I'm told that this newfound enthusiasm for civil rights activity has helped SCLC. That our memberships are up. Aren't you getting more people interested in joining SCLC now?
Oh, thank you for making that statement and asking me about our memberships. Astronomically, Mr. Eden. And you know why we get memberships? We have a structure.
Right.
And we have the history. And people say, we know we got the history. We still here. We ain't going nowhere. We are still here. And we got a institution in its own right. We have the SCLC Kingdom philosophy as well as the history that we teach folks. And we're not looking for no headline. We're not looking to be on the evening news. We're chipping away and keeping the foundation. We are structurally, historically, integrally, we are here to stay and we're sustainable.
Tell people how they can join, Dr. Steele, before we go. How can they join?
Well, first of all, you can always call the office SCLC, and also you can go online, national SCLC.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been this week's edition of SCLC TV. You've heard it loud and clear from our president, Dr. Charles Steele Jr. See you next week.